Well, thank you again for being here this evening for this month's webinar Wednesday. My name is Jamie Middleton. I'm one of the program officers here at Humanities Arkansas. This month we are talking about reporting requirements. So either you are interested in applying for a grant or have received a grant in the past. And so this is just kind of a tutorial in what we're looking for as far as our financial reporting and data and evaluation reporting. So I'm going to share my screen. All right. And feel free to pop questions in the chat or stop me if I'm going too fast. I'd love to keep it as fairly informal as I can. We've started doing these as a way to assist prospective applicants and grantees every month become more familiar with our grants, trying to make them less daunting if we can. So just to kind of start off, if you do not know who we are a nonprofit affiliate of the National Endowment for the Humanities. Our mission to empower Arkansans and connect through humanities. And so what this means for grants is that the National Endowment for the Humanities allocates a certain amount for state humanities councils. There are 56 of us across the country and the territories. And so of that allocation, we as a council, we allocate funding for granting. And so we're talking about those reportings that we have to do on your end and our end as well. And so tonight we're going to talk about what even is reporting, pay schedules, what we require as far as receipts and proof of payment for your grant funding, and then the data and evaluation portion. And so if I talk too quickly, let me know and I can slow down. But we also have those on our website, and we will be putting this webinar on YouTube after we're through this evening. And so reporting begins as soon as you are awarded a grant with the pre-award paperwork. So as soon as your application has been approved by our board of directors, you no longer are an applicant, but are a grantee. And so when this occurs, you should receive an email as the project director to fill out next steps and how you receive those funds. And so that process looks like this as far as a flow chart. Once your grant award decision was made, you'll receive an email from us with all of the important information as far as your grant period dates, what your grant number is, where you need to upload all of your documents, how to start filling out those documents, and then proper acknowledgements for the National Endowment for the Humanities as well as Humanities Arkansas. And so that first step is the grant agreement and pay request. This is how you initiate receiving your grant funding. And so a grant agreement is a legal document for us between you as the grantee, the fiscal agent that you've named in your approved application, who will be handling all of your funding disbursements. And then with us, that just kind of outlines the condition of your grant, basically saying what you have outlined in your grant proposal is what you're going to do. And then the pay request is you initiating us to disperse that first payment to you. And so this document will be signed by you as a project director or you as the fiscal agent to get that process started. You will then submit more paperwork after your project is completed. We've moved away from the initial paperwork, quarterly report, and final report. We only are doing a initial paperwork and final report. And so once your project is completed, there will be a final report and pay request. And so this is where you let us know how your project went, what the impacts are, how successful it was, as well as being able to do all of the accounting as far as how those grant funds were spent. And so once you've completed all these steps and we don't need any additional information from you, we'll close your grant. Only organizations can only hold one grant at a time. And so if you're looking to apply for another grant, you'll need to close out your first one before you can submit for another grant. This gets a little tricky with universities. We do things a little different as far as universities go. Only one department within your university can hold a grant at a time. So if English is holding a grant and history is holding a grant, another history department person cannot apply for another grant at that time. We all have to close out the one before we get to the next one. And so with that, in your award email designating your grant period dates, so for our major grant cycle that we're in right now, projects begin December 1st and they will run a year until November 30th of the following year. And so all grants have a specific first beginning date, and then a year later is when they need to be closed. And so from there, you will have 30 days at the end of that period to finish getting in any extra paperwork, and then 60 days for our major grant recipients. At that time, humanities staff will review and approve your reporting. If we need additional information, we'll contact you and try to get that from you. Only until then will your grant be closed and payments dispersed. So as I mentioned, we've done away with the quarterly report. So we are no longer doing a 50, 25, 25 pay installment. We are now doing a 90, 10. And so for smaller organizations, that'll help out a lot on the front end with your expenses instead of waiting all the way to the end. Some larger organizations prefer to do all of their grant payments at the end, so they don't have to worry about keeping track of if they've overspent their funding. So at the grant agreement, the pre-award paperwork with that and the first payment request are required. And so there's not a lot of receipt keeping for that portion. It's just mostly making sure your signatures are in order. All of the receipts really come in at the final report. We do request that these reports and documentation be completed correctly, completely, and on time. Otherwise, you could fall into non-compliance, and that would affect eligibility for future grants. And so just a little bit more about non-compliance. Because we are a pass-through entity, meaning that NEH is giving us funding to give to you as an organization, we are also being held in compliance with NEH. So in trying to keep everybody above board, we have some examples of non-compliance where you used funds that for ineligible expenses. So if you, in the middle of your project, something came up and you needed to cover food costs, that would be ineligible. And if it wasn't rectified, you would be in non-compliance. The same with not submitting required reports or failure to get approved changes for a project, because we do understand that things happen over the course of a project. Your proposal is largely an estimate of what you think is going to happen, and we all know things do happen. And so we would love to help you as much as possible, but we do need notice. So we do request that grantees who come with face certain obstacles, if you need to reallocate funds or if you need an extension on a particular report, we're more than happy to consider your request, and usually requests are reasonable. We will approve those requests for you. And so if we get to a point where we have to jump into non-compliance, this could mean withholding award payments. So if you're not turning in all of your paperwork, we will not be able to give you funding until that paperwork is completed. The same thing with reallocation of funding. We will not allow for food costs or things outside of your ascribed approved budget to be funded without prior approval. This could also look like being entirely ineligible depending on the severity of the infraction. But this is all within the code that the National Archives and NEH have recommended as non-compliance procedures. But again, we would love to see everyone not do that. So please feel free to reach out over the course of your project. If something comes up, we're more than happy to talk with you and work with you to make things work out for you. And so we're going to talk a lot about finances, and finances are not fun. Filling out forms are not fun. So we have funny memes to help us get through these times. So as I mentioned, to initiate your grant payments, we need some forms filled out, and that we need these forms complete, correct, and on time. And for me to show you the money, I need to see the receipts before we can do stuff like that. And so by complete, that means I need the form, all of the fields filled out appropriately with all the correct information, all the correct people signing and dating where they need to sign it. Incorrect, we'll get to it a little bit more in that what you provide to me in your form matches your receipts and it matches your budget, because we do cross-check throughout the process. And then on time, we do provide deadlines in Foundant, our grant portal system, as far as when each report is due. And so getting those reports in on time is really important in making sure those are submitted in a timely manner. So this is our financial report and payment request. We use these for our grant agreement or not our grant agreement, the financial report and your initial payment request. We use the same form for both. It is not always the most user-friendly, and so we're going to walk through it together. In your reporting in Founded, there is a clickable link that will allow you to download this form, as well as additional forms that might be useful to you as you fill these out. And so the top portion is just getting your general information as far as what your project is, the amount you were awarded. Up here at the top, if you're just filling it out for your initial payment request, you'll just check the payment request box. If it's for your final report and you're requesting your last 10% or however much you're requesting, you'll check both that box and the final financial report. This is the organization that you're applying under, the name and its address, and how much you're requesting. Do feel free to just regard the same as portion because we've changed the way we're doing our installments. That isn't as correct at this point in time. And so then we get to the project grant period. That's all found within your award email. So for this current major grants, it would be December 1 to November 30th. And then the project, the period covered by this report, this was a little more important when we were doing quarterly reports. If folks are still doing quarterly reports at this time, if you're submitting a quarterly report, it's from grant period, from the grant agreement to what is spent at the quarterly report. And when you're submitting your final report, it would be quarterly report to final report. And so at the moment, with our 90-10, it'll just be the full grant period. And then we get into what is actually being spent here in the table. How are you spending your grant funds? We'll mostly be living in the purple and black ovals. As I mentioned, we're moving away from the quarterly report where the previous period would be more used. So when you're signing this for your grant agreement, it's very likely you don't have any kind of expenses at that time. So you don't really need to worry about putting anything in the table at that time. When you get to your final report, the purple oval is where you're putting all of your expenses. So what you've actually spent towards books, honoraria, travel, that's where you'll put those into the appropriate fields. If I have folks who are still working with quarterly reports, if you incurred expenses between your grant agreement and quarterly report, you would put those in the purple. And when you get to the final report, you'll move the purple circle to the teal one, and then quarterly report to final report expenses will be in the purple circle. But all in all, the black circle with the total amount should align with the budget that was approved with your grant proposal. This gets into where we were talking about reallocation and making sure you're in compliance with not overspending or spending funds in the wrong categories. And so if you're seeing that your travel line is getting a little high compared to what you requested, and you're under budget somewhere else, you can email us and let us know and ask that those funds kind of move around. You can fluctuate between your categories. If you end up not needing something altogether, if you moved entirely virtual and you don't need in-person expenses, you can ask to reallocate those funds elsewhere. And then we get into cost share. We've done away with cost share for all but one of our grants, but we do ask that if you are bringing additional funds to your project that you include those as a part of your cost share and just to be able to report those. In kind being salary time put towards a project, in kind facility use, or for cash, other grants that you're bringing to a project, donations, that kind of stuff. If you're doing a public program and you need to do a reception, we would include that as a part of your cash cost share. and putting those in that black circle there. As I mentioned, only the major grant right now is requiring a cost share. This is where we'll look to make sure that your match has been met. For the major grant, we require a 50-50 cost share. And so we're looking to make sure that the cost share has been met and kind of aligns with what you had put in your grant proposal as well. Because when you apply for a major grant, you have to have that cost share up front. So we're just making sure that all goes through as planned. And then finally, the signatures from your fiscal agent and project director. Once all of these have been completed, you've filled out your financial form. You don't need to worry about boxes 12 or 13. We'll handle those boxes on our end. And so we're back to receipts. Receipts are very important in reconciling all of your funding. So with the numbers that are in your table, we're looking for receipts that corroborate those numbers, making sure that you're spending the funding the way that you said you would and are upkeeping the grant agreement we have with each other. And so for proof of payment does exactly what it says it does. It is proof that a payment was made for a thing. And so we're looking to see what the purchase was, when it was purchased, where it was purchased, and for the total amount it was purchased. And then a method of payment, which is mostly just showing that the payment was made, there's a zero balance, and you don't owe anything on that particular purchase. And then finally, we're looking for those proofs of payment, the receipts, to match or add up to what you have in your financial form. We will send things back, or if you're missing receipts, we'll ask you for them. We will do that enough times as necessary to make sure that they are all aligned with one another. And so eligible versus ineligible documentation. Of course, we have receipts like if you went to Walmart to purchase supplies or Office Depot, anything like that, that receipt would work. Canceled checks for folks who use those to do honorary or paying a vendor, we'll accept those, as well as paid invoices. Again, it's all showing that a purchase was made, there's not a balance due, and it's for the thing that you requested and said you were going to buy. What is ineligible are unpaid invoices, because that doesn't tell me anything about your purchase or that it was purchased. And the same thing with purchase orders and online shopping carts. Bank statements, we usually use those if you don't have a receipt. So if you only have an unpaid invoice for purchasing books or for a vendor, you can use your bank statements as a way to corroborate, yes, I paid this thing. This is how much it was. This is when it was paid. And so when we do all of these, there's usually a slot for your financial report and then your receipts. We ask that all your receipts be uploaded as a single PDF. For large projects, we understand that it's a lot of receipts, a lot of things. We tend to recommend that folks keep like a sort of ledger or an Excel sheet, and that'll help us be able to make sure we're not missing anything. It also helps you make sure you're not missing anything. Being able to say the date it was purchased, what it is, and what page on the PDF it is. That has been really helpful for folks in the past. That is all the finances. In addition to the finances, we ask for data and evaluation. And so this is important to us to understand the impact, the reach, and the success of your project. We use this data to tell NEH all of the great humanities projects that are happening and letting them know that their money is going to great things in our state. It also allows us to talk with our board about the ways that we could better serve our Kansans and which initiatives are doing really well and what projects we're seeing more of and what projects we would like to see reaching other parts of the state. It also lets us know, like with the museum collections and resource grant, that one is fairly new, but with all of the reports that have come in and how many grants have gone out for that particular grant, it lets us know that that is something that's really important to our state and for folks who need those kinds of resources. On the other hand, for our REACH grant, which is our education grant, we allow teachers to use that grant for professional development or classroom resources. And so we have been getting a lot more professional development grants than classroom grants. And so we're having to take stock of what we're using that money for, what's allocated, and whether or not we need to cut that bucket smaller or to be able to put it elsewhere, or if we need to do more outreach in other places to make that more worthwhile for different teachers in different parts of the state. And so what you put into your final reports, what you put in for your responses are really important to us. I do read everything that you put into your report because it does let us know a lot about what's happening in our state. And so for your final report, we ask a lot of different questions. So for your project info is basically your title, where the project took place, and kind of a written description of what took place and who was involved and what they did. We also ask for specific counties served. For your audience, we're asking how many people were served or participated in your program, or listened to your podcast, visited your exhibit, and things like that. We also ask for groups or communities specifically that were represented as a part of your project. And then in your project proposals, we asked you what your target audience was and who you're trying to reach with your project. Here in the final report, we ask what your success was in reaching that audience. We also request an audience evaluation of your program. I hope this helps in planning projects in the future and doing this webinar and letting you know what we're looking for at the end, so you can build it in to begin with what we're looking for as far as putting out audience surveys or asking folks who attend your programs to give feedback, because we love reading those things. With the media, we ask if there's any involvement, publicity, or promotion from news outlets, radio stations. If you're doing ads on social media, we ask for those kinds of things. If there was media created as a part of your project, whether it be like a digital exhibit, a podcast, or a documentary film, we would love to see it. If your file size is too big for what we have as an upload size, we're working on different ways of housing those final media project files. We usually have people send them as a disk or as a thumb drive to our office, but we're looking at better digital management for those files instead. Then the Humanities Scholar for our project grants. How did the scholar participate and evaluate through the project? What was their perspectives of what went well and what pieces they worked directly on? And then the impact statement is one of the more important parts of the written final report. It tells us how the funds directly impacted your organization, project, or audience. And so we have both a written text box and then a file upload for you. We would love to see direct statements from your audience or people who are involved with your project, people who work within your organization that were a part of the project and what it meant to them. We love reading all of those things, and it's really beneficial to keeping our grants to the size that they are and maintaining the different initiatives we have and being able to grow those initiatives. And then we have our attachments. We ask for an evaluation committee report. In your proposal, we asked for who would be serving on this committee and what their perspective was on how the project went. We asked for materials developed, whether it's flyers, social media graphics, pamphlets, mailings, those kinds of things. We asked for photographs. It is a single upload, so you would either have to merge them all together, or we've had a lot of people create Google Drives that have all of the information in it and just upload the link for us. And so we can look at those and pull those to share with people all of the amazing projects that are happening in our state and being able to continue these projects. And then, of course, the financial report and the receipts. So once you have all of the documents and all of the responses, you will submit through our Foundant Grant portal. We unfortunately cannot accept things sent via email unless we ask you for them directly that way. And so all official submissions need to happen in Foundant. And so once those submissions are made, staff will review your responses and financial documentation. And so what we're looking for is completeness, correctness, and timeliness. If we see any issues or if you're missing a receipt or if something's not quite adding up, we will send it back to you and ask for those revisions or that additional documentation. And so we compare budgets from your application all the way through your final report. We look at your initial responses and what you plan to do and what that looks like at the end. And so sometimes we needed a little additional information as far as what happened over the course of the project, especially now that we are doing away with a quarterly report that kind of gave us an insight as to what midway through your project it looked like. But once everything is square, all of your receipts are in order, all of your responses are in order, you have all your attachments, your submission is approved. When you get to the final report, that submission means you get your final payment and you close your grant. Once you have submitted your paperwork, it's approved, whether it be your grant agreement, initial payment request, or final report, you'll receive a message from bill.com. If you're doing direct deposit, that is our financial operating system and our payable accounts payable system. And so when we ask for your fiscal agent's email address, this is why we're asking for that, so they can get an email directly from through bill.com to set up an account so we can pay directly to you. For the folks who don't do direct deposit, checks will be mailed rather than doing this direct deposit system. If you have any questions about bill.com or setting up an account and understanding all the things that it does, they have a really cool learning center about all the different ways you could use bill, but typically it's just you need to set up an account to add a bank account or a direct deposit wherever your funding is going, for your fiscal agent to disperse it appropriately. And so a lot of technical jargon, a lot of information. So just kind of as a quick recap, reporting is very important from receiving your grant to getting your grant funds for us to continue to do grants so you can receive them. For us to remain in compliance, for you to remain in compliance for future funding, we ask that your reporting be turned in completely, correctly, and on time. And that is the long and short of grant reporting. Thank you all so much for being here. I will adjourn us for the evening. If you have any questions, again, please email us. We're happy to help. But yeah, thank you so much for being here. Y'all have a good evening.